Good morning. This is a debriefing of my trip to Roaring Spring 2 days ago, Wednesday. And the first was I treated whimsically that idea that I rescued two thrones, I called them, toilets that were put out in the yard. I assume because they were still good and maybe somebody wanted. Anyway, I said enough about that. But there were other things to say. My Mennonite teacher, 82-year-old Mervyn, I couldn't get him the night before, but I stopped anyway. First, I stopped where I got raw milk. Oh, and by the way, there was a big article in Altoona Mirror newspaper about that farm. Trying to think the name. I can't think of the name. That farm being one of the only ones in Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania being one of the only states that could legally sell raw milk, which was great. So anyway, I stopped there, and Dervin, I met him. He came out and spoke to me. I said, gee, we've got a Mervyn, a Dervin, and another Mervyn. And we talked a little bit, but then I asked him about Mervyn, my teacher, and I asked how his wife was doing. And he said, not good, not good. And I was afraid of that. He said probably he didn't answer the phone because he was at the hospital, probably. I said, I don't know if I should stop by or not. And he said, oh, you should stop by. So I did, and I left some books off. He wasn't there. And I left some books off. Now, his house isn't locked. Nothing's locked. Well, that's the way we are too. But, you know, most people, oh, they got to lock everything up. I went into his back porch and laid the books on a sink and left. And so that gave me more time. I didn't have that hour where I was working on learning Pennsylvania Dutch and also learning about the Mennonites. So I visited with my sister, which was nice. A lot of times I don't have time. But anyway, we stopped. And the next eventful thing that happened was when I went up to the hardware store, which is one of my usual stops. I did get some hardware, but a man there, Dylan M. Dodson, Dylan M. Dodson, is the young man who is he's an actor, and I've mentioned him before. He works there, but he's also an author, and I wanted to know more about his writing. I knew he wrote fiction, and I got the name of a book. It's called Rain by Dylan M. Dodson. You can look it up. Amazon's going to be selling it, I think. It's about 400 pages long. And the publisher, you know, himself, I think he calls himself the Bard of the Cove Publishing or something like that. So I continue to find that very interesting. We had time to talk a little bit about the possibility of fiction in set in Roaring Spring, as I think I've explained here. I said I imagined two books together called The Once and Future Roaring Spring. Well, see, he knew about the Once and Future King. He's educated himself along those lines. And he said, you might call it The Once and Future Spring. I thought, hey, that would be good. But I think I'll leave it Roaring Spring. But anyway, we talked about his work and my imagining of my work, and so that was good. Then I went on down, Meat Market, I always stopped there, but went down to where I got those toilets. And while I was there, guys were working there. They were working outside. It was a nice day, and they were working outside. And so I talked to him. I said, do you want rid of those toilets? And he said, do you want them? You can have them. And I said, well, I can use them. Anyway, I explained all about that. But in the process, I spoke more to this man. I think his name is Denny. And he's basically one of the principal carpenters who is involved in the restoration, the salvation, really, of some of those wonderful buildings in Roaring Spring. There are two families that I know of. They know each other. Well, Danny Kay's family, Sheena and her larger family. And then down there at the vault and the brewery, that's another family. He's part of that, Denny, that are gradually making it their business to restore the architecturally and restore the population too of the center of Roaring Spring. And we had it was nice to talk to him because I told him some of what I thought, about how Roaring Springs got a tremendous future. It will be a mecca for tourism, for tourists. I say that all the time, everywhere. And I said how I thought the center of it could be a college, or at least a trade school, and talked about that some more. And I told him about my Camp Ranch campus, Roaring Spring campus of Frank's school, that it existed. And he said, oh, I'll check that out. I don't know if he will, but I think he should. I told him there's about 40 videos on here now. And so that was productive in all kinds of ways. Nice meeting him and talking about what he was doing and seeing his perspective, a young guy. Then I went to Danike's Cafe, and there, again, there are always these productive conversations. When I got there, the place was humming. Sheena was really too busy talking really to even sell any food to me. I at least wanted a quart of their chili, and her grandmother was there, Audrey. She's pushing 90. As she put it, she's pushing a century. She's an amazing woman. And she was happy to see me and remembered me, and we talked about making cheese and cottage cheese and raw milk and all that. Delightful conversation. I could have stayed there for hours, really, but I really have that deadline. I do have to get back to the farm. But while I was there was a man, second time I've seen him now, sitting at the bar, sort of, what's his name? Harold, I think. No, it's not Harold. I can't, Detweiler is his last name. But he grew up in Fayetteville, and near Fayetteville or Baker Summit. And he had actually gone on, from talking to me before, he'd gone on to my YouTube channel. Or no, not there. He'd gone on to the Only in the Cove Facebook group and read some of the stuff I said about the mills. And I got valuable information about those water-powered mills, especially, or particularly the one in Waterside. He said that there was a group of people there just a week or so ago, or maybe it was the other woman that said that, that were taking photographs of it all and going all through it and stuff. And that was a woman that I'll tell you about her in a minute. She said the guy who owns it now, I think his name, is Denny, maybe, I don't know. But he'll charge $5 to let you go into the mill and look all around as much as you want. That's what I understand, which I may do that the next time I'm by there, I don't know. So we talked about that mill for a while, and the man from Fayetteville, whose name the Detweiler, he said he was starting to tell me about it. He had a cabin, and he had built a little water wheel at one point. We had he was kind of talkative this time. But one of the most interesting things there was a woman there that came in because there's a tanning salon there too, and she was going in and signing up and stuff, and I said, I stopped her because I said, did you say that you used to walk on the water wheel down there at the mill? And she said, yeah, I did as a little girl. We weren't supposed to because it was private property, but as children or youngsters or whatever, yeah, we'd go and we'd get on the wheel and we'd walk on the wheel. And I asked questions. I said, was there water in it? Was it turning under power while you did that? And she said, yeah, it was. We probably shouldn't have done it. And then I said, well, were you walking on steel or wood? I'm going to teach right through it. And I said, or she said, wood. Well, that makes it clear in my mind that wheel, before they took it away, that was not a Fitz wheel because they were metal. That was an older kind of wheel, and no wonder it cost so much when they put that one in there. And the other thing about that, I'm talking kind of loud because of that pump. Uh, the other thing is that gave me a glimpse of what it was like for her as a child. What kind of stuff did children do back when she was younger? She's not old like me. She might be in her 40s or maybe 50s, I don't think. And that helps me to imagine what my uncle's life was like when he was a boy, being raised and spending his life in Roaring Spring. Oh, and one other thing I'll tell you. When I was talking to the crew that are working on that place where the toilets were, there was an older guy there. Oh, yeah, older, definitely. And I talked to him just a little bit, and I said to him, didn't I talk to you once before? And he said, yeah, you did. And I said, you have a twin, right? And he said, yeah, and you were born in Old Mason Hospital, same as me, weren't you? Yeah. I said, when was that? 1951. Well, makes him 5 years younger than me, but the thing is, he remembers. He remembers the same Roaring Spring that I remember as a boy. Now, he lived his life there, and I only lived parts of it there, but he remembers clearly. So it was a valuable trip. I'm just giving you snippets in a way. When I went to the brewery, things were pretty slow there, so I didn't stay long. Bye for now.